Another thing as well is what an occupational therapist says, um, and even social work in some respects say, is needed for a person to thrive in their own home, and that home be suitable for all their needs, all their complexities of need, and very individual needs. Um, uh, they basically say a lot of times that their hands are tied because it goes higher than them, and it's not fair because these professional people are having to deal with people being put into or offered houses, properties that don't fully suit their needs. But because the situation is they're being told you have to take this house or you have nothing, people with extremely vulnerable needs are being offered properties that do not suit their needs in full, and that's not acceptable. And I think as well, where you've got individuals like my son who can't live in a semi-detached house, or can't live in a terraced house, or can't live in a flat, or can't live in a 4-room block or a maisonette, and it has to be a detached property. It means that the property availability is low. So they need to start looking into, when they're building properties, that they build some properties that have that spec already, and that people with very complex needs that cannot have an attached neighbour and need a quiet environment, that kind of property is there. Because I've seen now 2 or 3 times people of my son's age and younger being offered properties because of a similar situation that's happened in our scenario, or the adult gets too much for somebody to cope with on their own, like a parent or carer, and they try to find their son or daughter their own property with full support. And these young men and women are starting out on their own paths and their journeys where they are being started off on the wrong foot. Because if you give somebody the tools they need to help them live their life the way they want to live it, so they're happy and contented, and you start them off by the very first thing they have to deal with is being wrongly housed or inappropriately housed, what do you think is going to happen? That person's going to struggle. So it's now become a big battle where we are trying to struggle to get my son a better property, and that's a very difficult thing because we are now having to prove every single thing to show that that property doesn't suit his needs. Even although everybody knows it doesn't suit his needs, we are having to put paperwork in till it's coming out of our ears to specify what everybody knows in the first place. And as I said before, had they listened and given him what he needed in the first place, instead of continue offering post-war 1946 prefab Orlet builds that are no use, if they'd appropriately housed him in the first place, he wouldn't be in this position, and we wouldn't have been in a position either where we had to go down the route we did with the homelessness side of things. So I think with that in mind, I think there's a lot to tackle with regards to housing, the homelessness sector, medical needs, physical and mental health needs, complex disability needs, individuality based properties where people can have person-centred led supports in conjunction with a property that suits that person's needs. Because when you've got somebody like my son who is starting out his journey as a fully supported young man, trying to grow and, move forward in his life, How can he do that when you start him off on the wrong foot by not listening, not giving him what he needs, and not fighting the case for what people's needs are? Because there's going to be a rebellion at some point that's going to happen where frustrated parents and carers and individuals themselves, where able, are going to start calling these people out, and they're going to start really trying to get their power back by getting the properties that they need. Because it's not just a case of, oh, this young man or this young woman's autistic and they've got some sensory needs. Okay, stick them in here. The basics are there. That'll meet their needs. That'll do. It's a case of, the council one time told me, a housing officer one time told me, people aren't just offered houses. It has to be agreed by the professional people like an OT. Yeah, and then the OT are saying they only had to agree that this would be able to be workable with because they knew what the alternative was, which is no house. So professional people are getting put in really precarious situations because a occupational therapist has got to look at two sides of the coin, which is homelessness or a property that doesn't fully suit a person's needs, but will have to make it work in order so that person doesn't become homeless. Whereas the council should be looking at it and saying, okay, this is what this person needs. We will make sure that that happens, even if a house has got to be built to spec. Because it should not be an individual with the individual person that's got the disability and needs cross the bear, or that person's carers or parents cross the bear, that the particular type of accommodation that's needed isn't there. People with specific needs and carers and parents have got enough to deal with without having to be worrying about when people are trying to get their own homes, or they're in circumstances where they have to be in their own homes, where they're being let down by the system, and it's always something. So it's a case of, you're trying to start these young adults off on the right foot in their lives, and how can they do that if they are fighting with the system all the time and not being able to get a property? And people that have severe autism, like my son, who don't cope with change, they're just going to have to deal with the change and what that entails, and moving and what that entails in the first place. So when you're putting somebody into, you're giving them accommodation, you want that to be a forever home where possible, so that that individual can move into that house. And granted, they're going to have a transition period. Granted, they're going to have to learn to live in their new environment. But once they do, that's home. Instead of doing what they've done in our situation, which is giving him a property that doesn't suit his needs, and meaning that he is going to have to move again at some point into a property that does suit his needs, that he can call his forever home. It just seems absolutely crazy that a forever home's not offered in the first place, particularly with somebody on the spectrum who has the particular needs my son has and struggles with the things he has and does. It just would make the most sense to give him his forever home. He transitions, he deals with the transitions and the changes, and over time settles and adapts, and then he's in his forever home. And it's just a case of him growing and developing and learning. And of course, there's going to be things in his life that are hurdles, but the big hurdle is over and done with regards to the biggest hurdle is over and done with regards to him having his own place, that he is going to know, that's me, I'm settled and secure, and I don't have to move again. So I wanted to talk about that because I just feel like it's getting to the point now where parents and carers and individuals with particular needs that are able to actively voice their thoughts, opinions, and journeys are going to get to the point where people are going to get so frustrated and stressed out that you're going to have an influx of people needing houses, and you know, you not having houses to give, and then people being wrongly housed, and then they're having to be rehoused again because they've been wrongly housed in the first place. More care and attention needs to be going into this type of situation. And the homelessness sector in general is quite a shambles, I would say. And don't get me wrong, there is people in different places of employment and authority dotted across the board throughout this whole subject matter where their hands are tied because of those in higher up seats, if you like. And it's frustrating for them because they can only do so much because their hands are tied. And then when you go to the people that could do something about it or could start to get the ball rolling, they're just like, that's not my problem, it's this person's problem. And then you go to them and they say, that's actually not, we can't do that. You have to go back to them because they have to change things at a policy level. And if they change things at a policy level, that will then be able to roll out into a lot of different avenues and a lot of different people's individual lives. So I think that with all that being said, I think there's a lot of work needed. And I think if we all stick together and we different um, places of authority and different uh, places of support work together and pull from the same parachute, if you like, strings, then we can make this thing burst open in a positive way and be supportive for uh, every individual that I'm talking about in this side of things. The homeless sector, the housing sector as a whole, making sure people are properly and appropriately housed and not inappropriately housed, making sure that when people are in situations they do not end up in horrible homelessness units that are going to impact their physical and mental well-being. There's just a lot of things to tackle. So I'm using this platform because I'd like to know what people think. I'd like to know if people have experienced these things firsthand themselves. If so, what's your thoughts, experiences and journeys? And I would like to also find out what people think about what they feel is needed in these different sort of sectors and pockets of the homelessness and housing sector. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I hope that we can open some healthy topics of discussion moving forward. Okay, bye.